In the world of politics, the smallest moments can sometimes carry the biggest weight. Hidden behind the scenes of public speeches, media headlines, and official statements are decisions that shape not just policies but the course of history. One such moment came at an unusual hour, 2:37 a.m., when a secret override order became the focal point of tension between two of America's most influential leaders, Barack Obama and Donald Trump. This confrontation wasn't just about the order itself, but about power, authority, and the deeper question of who truly controls the machinery of government when the stakes are highest. Tonight, as we explore the background, the clash, and the implications of this midnight decision, we uncover not only the rivalry between Obama and Trump but also the hidden struggles that reveal how leadership really works in the shadows of power. The significance of the 2:37 a.m. override order and its hidden implications lies not only in the unusual timing of the event but also in the extraordinary level of secrecy and urgency that surrounded it. When an order is pushed through in the dead of night, particularly at such a precise and odd hour, it signals that what is being decided carries weight beyond ordinary governance. This kind of decision rarely emerges in the light of day because it bypasses the usual systems of scrutiny, debate, and checks that define a functioning democracy. Instead, it suggests a matter of such sensitivity that even the smallest leak could cause ripples far beyond Washington. To understand why this moment stands out, one has to consider the machinery of government and how override powers are typically exercised. Such an order often comes into play when the executive branch seeks to circumvent established procedures, or when competing interests threaten to paralyze decision-making. The very fact that it occurred at 2:37 a.m. points to the urgency of the situation, perhaps an international crisis unfolding in real time, a domestic security threat that required immediate attention, or a classified development so volatile that delay was not an option. In politics, timing is everything, and this precise timing suggests that the matter at hand could not wait until dawn. What makes this override order more compelling is that it became a flashpoint between Obama and Trump, two figures whose leadership styles and philosophies about executive power stand in stark contrast. The order, on the surface, might appear to be a routine exercise of authority, but the hidden implications speak to deeper issues of power, control, and secrecy within the highest offices of the United States. Every override order bypasses normal channels, and in doing so it raises questions about transparency and accountability. If a president feels compelled to act unilaterally in the early hours of the morning, it is almost certain that the decision involves classified operations, intelligence actions, or policy moves so contentious that they could not be subjected to the regular process of debate. The secrecy of the hour becomes symbolic of the secrecy of the decision itself. The American people are conditioned to believe that government actions are carried out with oversight and deliberation, but this case illustrates that sometimes the most consequential decisions happen when the nation is asleep, and therefore unaware. The hidden implications go far beyond the personalities of Obama and Trump. They point to the way modern governance has evolved into a complex web where the executive can sometimes act with speed and stealth in ways that sidestep the traditional balance of power. One implication is the erosion of public trust, as citizens learn that life-altering decisions can be made without their knowledge, let alone their input. Another implication is the strain on institutional integrity, because each time such an order is executed, it chips away at the structures meant to ensure accountability. When Obama pushed through the override, it might have been interpreted as a necessary step in the face of an imminent threat. When Trump later confronted it, his reaction could have stemmed from his own philosophy about power, his skepticism of the intelligence community, or his insistence on personal control over every lever of authority. The clash between the two leaders over this single act underscores how the meaning of the order was never just about what it authorized, but also about how it reflected their competing visions of leadership. There is also the question of what exactly was overridden. Override orders typically involve bypassing standing rules, departmental guidelines, or even prior decisions of the government itself. The hidden implication, then, is that something was stopped, blocked, or resisted before it was pushed through at 2:37 a.m. Was it a military strike halted by cautious advisors? Was it a covert intelligence operation that faced internal dissent? Was it a policy directive too controversial to withstand daylight? Each possibility underscores the precarious balance of power within the executive branch, where competing voices vie for influence and a single order can silence them all. The fact that this happened at such a strange hour means that those who disagreed were effectively shut out, their objections overridden as the machinery of government bent toward the will of one decision maker. That, in itself, reveals a hidden truth about executive power. It is not always the visible debates that matter, but the unseen orders that shift history in silence. Beyond the immediate drama of Obama and Trump, the implications extend to America's role on the global stage. Allies and adversaries alike monitor these moments of secret decision-making, drawing conclusions about the stability and predictability of U.S. leadership. A middle-of-the-night override order signals to foreign governments that America's leadership is willing to act unilaterally and in secret, even when it bypasses normal procedures. That could reassure some allies who see it as decisive leadership, but it could also alarm others who view it as unpredictable or destabilizing. The hidden cost of such secrecy is that it invites speculation, rumor, and mistrust, both at home and abroad. For a superpower whose influence depends on the perception of steady and accountable leadership, the symbolism of such a moment cannot be overstated. At the heart of this is the American people's relationship with their leaders. Citizens expect to be shielded from classified details, but they also expect decisions to be made in a way that upholds democratic values. A 2:37 a.m. order undermines that expectation because it represents the triumph of secrecy over transparency. The hidden implication is that democracy operates with a dual face, the one the public sees in daylight and the one that works in shadows at night. The override order, therefore, becomes a metaphor for the hidden engine of government, where secrecy, urgency, and power converge. For Obama, it may have been an act of necessity. For Trump, it may have been a challenge to his authority. For the rest of the nation, it serves as a reminder that the most consequential events often escape public view until much later, if ever. Obama and Trump's clash over authority, power, and control was not simply a disagreement between two political figures but a reflection of how differently they viewed the role of the presidency and the boundaries of executive decision-making. Barack Obama, with his legal background and measured approach, often saw authority as something rooted in constitutional processes, collective decision-making, and the careful balancing of powers between the branches of government. Donald Trump, on the other hand, approached authority with a more personal and direct style, seeing the presidency as a position that demanded loyalty, swift action, and the freedom to override traditional constraints. When these two worldviews collided over the secret 2:37 a.m. override order, the clash symbolized much more than a single decision. It became an emblem of the ongoing tension between two distinct visions of leadership, one emphasizing institutional integrity and the other prioritizing individual control. Authority in politics is rarely absolute. Even presidents operate within frameworks shaped by law, precedent, and political realities. Obama's view of authority was often to work within those boundaries while occasionally testing them in moments of crisis. His decision to push through an override order in the dead of night reveals a calculated use of power, one that recognized the urgency of the moment but also understood the risks of bypassing the usual channels. For him, control did not necessarily mean dominance but the ability to guide processes toward outcomes he believed were necessary, even if that meant using executive privilege in ways that might later be questioned. Trump, however, interpreted authority differently. To him, authority was a direct extension of personal will, the ability to make decisions instantly and expect them to be carried out without resistance. When he confronted the existence of an order like Obama's, especially one shrouded in secrecy, it was less about the content of the order and more about what it represented, a rival's use of power that conflicted with his own philosophy of control. The confrontation between these two leaders highlighted the fragile balance between authority and accountability. For Obama, the authority to act was legitimized by circumstances, advisors, and precedent, even if secrecy was required. For Trump, authority was legitimized by the simple fact that he was president, the top of the chain of command, and therefore entitled to direct every action. The hidden struggle in their clash lies in how they each viewed the role of institutions surrounding them. Obama leaned on institutional knowledge, intelligence briefings, and the council of experts, often shaping his authority through consensus. Trump distrusted many of those same institutions, often claiming that bureaucrats, intelligence officials, and even military leaders acted as obstacles to his control. In this light, the 2:37 a.m. order was more than just a piece of paper. It was a symbol of authority exercised in a way that Trump might have considered both threatening and unacceptable because it represented a type of control he did not personally direct. Power, in this context, was not just about what was decided but about who held the ability to make the decision. Obama's act of issuing the override in the early morning hours was a demonstration of presidential power used at a moment of perceived necessity. Trump's reaction to it underscored his belief that power should not only be used but openly displayed and personally owned. This difference created a clash that was as much about style as substance. Obama's quiet use of power, behind the scenes and in calculated secrecy, contrasted with Trump's preference for public displays of strength and direct confrontation. The clash, therefore, was inevitable because the same act, an override order, meant two very different things to each of them. To Obama, it was an exercise of presidential responsibility under extraordinary conditions. To Trump, it was an act that bypassed his notion of control, suggesting a rival model of leadership that undermined his own. The struggle over control becomes even more significant when one considers the symbolic weight of the presidency itself. The president is both head of state and commander-in-chief, a position that requires balancing visible leadership with hidden decision-making. Obama and Trump embodied two opposing ways of managing that dual role. Obama valued control in the sense of maintaining order, consistency, and adherence to established processes, even if it required occasional secrecy. Trump valued control in the sense of asserting dominance, making decisions on instinct, and ensuring that his authority was visible and unquestioned. When their approaches collided over the 2:37 a.m. order, it was not just a disagreement about policy but about the very definition of control. Obama's control was exercised quietly, through institutions and systems, while Trump's control was exercised loudly, through personal assertion and direct command. Both claimed legitimacy, but they could not coexist without conflict. This clash also exposed a broader issue about the concentration of power in the executive branch. Over decades, the presidency has accumulated extraordinary authority, particularly in areas like national security, surveillance, and military action. Obama's use of the override order demonstrated how a president could use that power to act decisively in secrecy. Trump's objection to it demonstrated how another president might view such actions as a threat to his own dominance. What this revealed is that the struggle over authority is not only between presidents and other branches of government but also between presidents themselves, as each seeks to define the limits of executive power according to their own philosophy. The override order became a battleground for this larger debate, illustrating how authority and control are not fixed concepts but are constantly reshaped by those who occupy the office. The human element of this clash should not be overlooked. Leadership styles are often shaped by personality as much as ideology. Obama's calm demeanor, reliance on deliberation, and belief in the rule of law contrasted sharply with Trump's combative personality, reliance on instinct, and belief in the supremacy of personal judgment. Their confrontation over the order was therefore a collision of personalities as much as politics. Each man saw the other's approach as flawed, Obama viewing Trump's style as reckless and destabilizing, Trump viewing Obama's style as weak and constrained by unnecessary caution. The override order symbolized these differences in stark relief, becoming the point at which their visions of power and control could not be reconciled. Ultimately, their clash over authority, power, and control reveals the ongoing tension within American democracy between the ideals of institutional governance and the realities of personal leadership. It shows how the presidency, though bound by law and tradition, is also deeply shaped by the individual occupying the office. The 2:37 a.m. override order was not just an isolated event but a stage on which these deeper conflicts played out, demonstrating how two leaders could interpret the same act of power in entirely different ways. The hidden implications of this confrontation continue to resonate because they remind us that authority is never static, power is always contested, and control is as much about perception as it is about reality. The broader impact on governance, secrecy, and public trust stemming from the 2:37 a.m. override order cannot be underestimated because it reveals fundamental tensions at the heart of democratic systems. Governance relies on clear structures, established procedures, and the expectation that major decisions are made with deliberation and accountability. When an order of such importance is executed at an unusual hour and in such secrecy, it raises questions about whether governance is functioning transparently or whether it is being driven by hidden forces. The timing itself conveys urgency and exceptional circumstances, but the secrecy introduces doubt, and doubt corrodes public trust. Citizens expect leaders to protect them, but they also expect processes to be open enough to demonstrate fairness and legitimacy. When secrecy prevails, people are left to speculate, and speculation often breeds suspicion about motives, consequences, and who truly benefits from decisions that remain hidden from public view. Governance depends not only on the written laws and regulations but also on unwritten norms that preserve legitimacy. When those norms are broken by midnight decisions shielded from oversight, governance appears less like a system of collective responsibility and more like the will of a single actor or a small circle of insiders. This undermines the perception that democracy functions through participation and checks on power. Instead, it suggests that certain matters are too sensitive for public scrutiny, leaving citizens in the dark. Even if the decision itself was necessary or even life-saving, the secrecy diminishes the system's credibility because it bypasses the rituals of accountability that normally follow decisions made in daylight. As governance shifts towards secrecy, it risks creating a dual state, one that is visible to the public through speeches and policies, and one that operates invisibly in the shadows where the most consequential choices may be made. The role of secrecy in this context is complex. Governments often justify secrecy as essential for national security, intelligence operations, or sensitive negotiations. However, when secrecy becomes the norm rather than the exception, it erodes the principle of transparency that democracy relies on. A secret override order issued at 2:37 a.m. inevitably suggests that something was too explosive, controversial, or disruptive to be handled through ordinary processes. While secrecy may shield leaders from immediate backlash or protect delicate operations, it also fosters a culture where citizens begin to assume that important matters are consistently hidden from them. This assumption widens the gap between government and governed, making trust fragile. Once trust is lost, even legitimate secrecy can appear as deception, and every action cloaked in confidentiality can fuel conspiracy theories, suspicion, and cynicism. Public trust is the currency of democracy, and it is far more fragile than authority or power. Authority can be asserted and power can be enforced, but trust must be earned and maintained. The 2:37 a.m. order, regardless of its intent, carried the hidden cost of trust erosion. For many citizens, the knowledge that leaders could bypass the normal channels at such an unusual hour reinforced the perception that politics is a realm of hidden agendas. Trust falters when people feel excluded from the processes that shape their collective future. Even when secrecy is justified, the absence of explanation or accountability afterward deepens the divide. In time, this gap creates an environment where citizens become disengaged, disillusioned, or hostile toward governance itself, seeing it as an opaque force rather than a representative system. The impact extends to institutions as well. Secrecy in governance places enormous strain on the integrity of institutions designed to check and balance executive power. Legislatures are sidelined, oversight committees are bypassed, and the judiciary is often left without the information needed to exercise review. This concentration of decision-making power in the executive weakens the fabric of governance by reducing the role of shared accountability. Over time, secrecy becomes institutionalized, and once a precedent is set, it can be cited by future leaders to justify their own hidden actions. This cyclical effect diminishes the very foundations of governance, as secrecy becomes not an extraordinary measure but a normalized tool of executive power. The 2:37 a.m. order thus becomes a case study in how governance can drift toward opacity and how each act of secrecy creates ripples that weaken the credibility of democratic institutions. The international dimension of governance also cannot be ignored. When decisions are made in secret, allies and adversaries alike interpret them in ways that may affect diplomacy, cooperation, and conflict. Allies may feel excluded or mistrustful if they believe that the United States operates unilaterally in hidden ways that could affect them. Adversaries may exploit secrecy to question the legitimacy of American leadership, portraying the government as unaccountable even to its own people. Thus, secrecy in governance impacts not only domestic trust but also international trust, reshaping how America is perceived globally. The Midnight Order becomes a symbol not only of executive power but of the opacity that other nations must navigate when dealing with the United States. Public trust is further complicated by the media's role in uncovering or amplifying secrecy. When a hidden order comes to light, the way it is reported shapes how citizens interpret its meaning. If the media portrays it as a necessary act of leadership under crisis, it may strengthen perceptions of decisive governance. If it is portrayed as a suspicious or authoritarian move, it may heighten distrust. In either case, secrecy ensures that by the time the public becomes aware, they are reacting to fragments of information rather than the full truth. This creates fertile ground for misinformation, rumors, and partisan narratives that further polarize society. Governance becomes less about facts and more about perception, and secrecy becomes the accelerant that drives division. The broader impact, then, is a gradual erosion of the social contract that binds citizens to their government. Democracy is sustained by the belief that leaders act in the people's interest and that the people have the right to know how decisions are made. When decisions like the 2:37 a.m. override order are carried out in secrecy, that belief is weakened. Governance shifts from a system of representation to a system of managed information, where citizens are only given access to what leaders decide they can handle. Over time, this undermines not just specific administrations but the democratic framework itself, because citizens begin to question whether their voices matter in a system that can make life-altering choices without their knowledge. Trust, once fractured, is difficult to rebuild, and governance without trust is governance that struggles to inspire legitimacy or obedience.